which no one in the real world will read except for a bunch of their peers who will give them, who will cite it in their papers, and who will give, help them get tenure. That's how the academic system works. That's not how the commercial system works. That's not how we commercialize technology. So what would I change if I was to do that? I would make tenure a function of commercialization. If someone wants to go, get government grants and get public money, hold them accountable to doing something with that. So change the tenure. In fact, I would eliminate tenure altogether if I had my way. But whatever rewards they get should be based on them producing some returns to society from the money that they've gotten from society. Right? It's a brutal thing to say, especially in a university.
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating area because universities have historically in the U.S. been very hostile to commercialization.
Yes.
But that has broken down over the years. Of course, Stanford University has been highly successful in breaking out of the cartel, if you will.
Yes.
And
MIT also.
It's hard to believe we only get $2 billion a year total because I thought Stanford had a lot more than $2 billion a year coming in because they own Google, they own Yahoo.
Yeah, here's the way it works. Okay, Stanford, it's all informal. That professors on the boards of local companies, they interact directly with venture capitalists.
Well, it's not all formal. I mean, Stanford University owns a big chunk of Google, for example.
Yeah, I know, but what happens is that most of it comes from successful entrepreneurs giving back to the university. It's in the endowment that benefits because they give back a lot.
And it's also gotten into the culture. That is to say, in the computer science department faculty,
right.
if you're not a 50 millionaire, that's actually, I think, a problem there, isn't it? I mean, I'm not a professor there, but I would think if you're not actually involved in that startup culture, right? That has become the culture of that part of the world. And of course, the current or the last president of Stanford was actually from the computer science department and was quite wealthy from those activities. And of course, the Google boys went to Stanford University on the idea that they would commercialize. That they didn't call it commercialization. They said they wanted to apply their ideas to change the world. But that's now attracting people like Brin and Page and so forth. They go to Stanford because they know where it's going to go from there.
I agree, absolutely.
And the billionaires, or according to Kenaletta, the 700, 100 millionaires that Google created, they live in Silicon. They're the people at Pete's Coffee.
I agree, and they invest in startups.
They're in that environment and looking for the next startup.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that encompasses Stanford and Berkeley. Okay, that's a public university. Is they're not going to? I mean, why rock that model? So that is spreading, of course, in the Harvards and the Dukes and the Caltechs.
Tom, it's in slow motion. That's what the problem is. That it's happening in slow motion. It's happening mostly in tech. It's not happening beyond tech. So
well, that's my question to you because you're in the middle of it. So you see at Duke, for example, there's still a lot of resistance.
The engineering school is now trying to do all these entrepreneurship things. The new dean is really in sync with it. The old dean wasn't as much in sync with this commercialization. So the culture is changing. But as you know, things move at the speed of molasses in academia. Right. So the trend is in the right direction. And there's a big awareness about the fact that it doesn't work. But again, we need more drastic changes. I mean, for example, I would, in Virginia, I mean, Anish Chopra, when he was the CTO here, because he and I have been working together on this stuff for a long time. He was actually trying to pass a bill which would open source all research from public universities in Virginia. As long as you built a company in Virginia, you could get anything for free from the university, no questions asked. I mean, because it's public money, $40 million comes into the UVA system. Well, the government would have given $40 million to universities in return for open sourcing all R&D from there. But they ran out of money, and then he moved on to the White House.
Right. Yeah, well, that's good. Yeah. So I'm in sort of heated agreement with pretty much everything you said in the last hour or so. This is just kind of a slight amendment on that $2 billion, because we were talking about the university licensing. And I actually interpret that number differently. I think that the whole discussion around licensing as a relevant number at all, and the academics do it themselves because it's used over and over and over again. And they show these charts with licensing revenues going up and the number of licenses going up. And it's all sort of like 500 licenses as opposed to 200. Ridiculously small numbers, relative to the totality of the system.
That's how they get measured.
Basically, just say it's an irrelevant number.
Yeah, I agree.
But then it gets to the point of what is the relevant number. And I think this open sourcing academic research is one point. certainly have, the whole norms of publishing and this kind of dead-end fixation of, the more exclusive, the more narrowly read, the more successful you are as an academic. So that has to change. But I'm just wondering about your thoughts on another dimension of what universities could be doing, which they're not doing, is opening up the relational networks. And I'm always astounded. I mean, I'm astounded by the stack of cards I have in my own drawer. That is a tremendous resource to somebody that I'm mostly wasting. If I worked at a company, it would all be on Salesforce.com. All of those contacts would be tracked. Anyone else in the company would have access to that. And this is something where I'm being paid as a state employee. I'm going out sometimes with money I've raised, sometimes with resources that the university has helped with, developing contacts. I'm bringing the Jordy Mason name out.
Right.
Nobody is even thinking about asking me to share those contacts. And I think that the sort of, that whole dimension
Right.
of what a professor does and what universities does, I almost never hear that, discussed in a policy.
I can't disagree with you. You're right. That's a great resource. The networks and the contacts and so on. It could be harnessed a lot more.
Do you see any university, bringing that into a Salesforce?
No, not at all.
Well, we should do that.
Yeah.
Basically.
Let me go. Question?
Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on university classes or programs in entrepreneurship. Is that something you can learn in the classroom?
Entrepreneurship can be learned, and it can help you a lot. But ultimately, what makes a difference is getting experience and being in the real world and working with other people and so on. There's a lot more happening in universities with teaching entrepreneurship. These business plan contests are a way of teaching entrepreneurship, so that's all good. But I advise my students to do is to learn all that stuff, and then instead of starting their own company, join someone else's startup, learn on someone else's nickel, before they jump out and do it themselves. There's so much to be learned about a business, and you can't you're not born with it. Zuckerberg basically lucked out that he was able to build a successful company. For every Zuckerberg, there are 10,000 failures, people who don't succeed. Question you want?
Follow up on what we're just talking about. So what do you think about, Virginia's model, what Anish was doing here with CIT and investing money and trying to get broadband, I think more aggressively than a lot of other states. Do you think that's the way forward for the U.S. state as far as trying to
Yeah, those are wise investments because it's like providing electricity, providing roads. That's what governments do well. Right now, broadband is as important as electricity is in the modern age. So definitely the government should wire the whole place up. France has done it. Singapore has done it. A lot of countries have fiber optic lines running all across the country. We don't, which is putting us at a big disadvantage.
You said that most people, at least in the U.S., don't become entrepreneurs because they're either afraid or they don't have any money. So I kind of have two questions. One, does any of your research look at cost of living differences between, obviously, India and Silicon Valley? And then two, have you thought of any, programs or ideas that would decrease that fear? And I'm just kind of interested in maybe your thoughts on universal health care. If you think people are afraid to move, most entrepreneurs are in their 40s, they have kids, they're married.
Yeah.
What kind of programs might?
Let's work backwards on that one. On universal health care, one of the impediments to starting companies is the fact that you're afraid of losing health insurance. So without doubt, that'll help because it takes one obstacle off the table, right? Now, as far as cost of living, if cost of living was an issue, no one would live in Silicon Valley. It's bloody expensive, right? I can tell you personal experience over there. Yet people do it because that's where the center of the universe is. That's where the center of gravity for tech world is. I've been researching Silicon Valley's magic. Why has it been successful? For example, what I did for the first few months of Silicon Valley was research why Indians became so successful. How is it that 30 years ago, the proportion of Indian-founded companies was 0, and today it's 15.5%. 6% of the population, 15.5% of startups. How do people who look weird, smell weird, talk weird, dress weird, end up founding such a disproportionate number of Silicon Valley companies? My conclusion is that it was the networks that they built. That they basically came in and they understood how Silicon Valley works. It's a giant network, and they built their own network. And they started teaching each other, mentoring each other, providing financing to each other, and that lifted, thousands of people into, to becoming successful. And then they started mentoring others, and that's what built the entire ecosystem. Right? So the Silicon Valley magic is a network. that it's the open exchange of ideas that makes a difference. This is why people go to Silicon Valley, because the moment you go there, you can tap into it. Every day, every evening, they, you know, I mean, the students at Stanford and Berkeley, every other evening they're going to a networking event with local entrepreneurs and getting involved with this club, that club. The type of activity that you see there in the evenings is just unbelievable. And even during the day, they talk to other entrepreneurs. Students mix with, you know, they do internships during their breaks and so on, working for local companies. So they basically tap into the network and assimilate into it. So this is why being here, you're at such a big disadvantage, because there's nothing equivalent to that. You don't have one concentrated area where everyone hangs out and meets. It's too scattered. The population is not as dense, and you know, there's no real tech center in this area, for example.
So another dust up you had was with some of your colleagues at Duke University, and you had made the comment that the research triangle part.
Oh yeah.
If it ever was.
Tom reads my articles. He reads my emails.
If it ever was a great center of innovation, was reduced to an environment in which networking consisted of real estate agents trading their business cards. And this provoked a response from a couple of colleagues at Duke, and I thought they made an interesting argument appealing to the fact that, well, Silicon Valley, they have it a lot easier. They grew spontaneously instead of through governmental programs.
Right.
And then they were bragging about how great the governmental programs were. So it seemed like a strange argument to make.
I know.
But the folklore on Silicon Valley is that it really became the tech and innovation center with all the unemployed aerospace engineers, the wipeout of the early 1970s.
Right.
And then that gave rise to, I guess, Fairchild Semiconductor and HP in terms of growth, and all these idle resources were out there. And it was spontaneous. It came out of sort of a disaster economically, because there was quite a wipeout in California at that time.
There was.
So then when you go around and you tell people that these clusters fail, they say, well, what do we do? How do we become Silicon Valley? I mean, you know, you have a great recession or something. I don't know if that's it.
Well, okay, here's you know, for example, I went to Chile. Let's talk about Chile. I got invited by, I mean, I've written several articles on outsourcing for Business Week, and the Chilean PR agencies wanted me to come and look at Chile's outsourcing agency with the hope that I'd write an article about how great it is down there and so on. And I warned them that, you know, I said, you know, I'm probably not going to be supporting you or be critical. They said, no, come. So they gave me a business class ticket to come to a big conference, and they said the president is going to be there. You can meet her, blah blah blah. So I said, fine, I'll come out there, free ticket. You know, Santiago in winter, when it was summer over there. You know, there are things worse than that. So I went out there.
What could happen in Chile?
Right. So
it's not an earthquake or getting trapped in a mine.
Right. Good one. So I went out there and I started meeting the outsourcing industry people, and then they had grown from 0 to $800 million over, you know, 7 years or 10 years or something, mostly with government subsidies and intervention. Very impressive. And then I said, okay, where do you go from here? They said, we're going to get to $5 billion in the next 5 years or so. I said, how? They said, well, we have 12% unemployment or something like that. And you know, they gave me the story about how they have these government programs to do this thing. I said, show me your engineering graduation rates. They graduated about the entire country has 16 million people, right? They graduate about 6,000 engineers a year. So I said, outsourcing call centers and so on are labor intensive. You don't have the labor for this. You don't have the skilled labor for this. They said, well, we have all of these unemployed people, and companies will start training people up. I said, show me the skill level of these. They're basically unemployed workers like you'd find in downtown DC. They didn't have those engineers or the scientists. And then they did have one source of talent, which is their petroleum industry, which is really, really advanced, lots of engineers and so on. I said, show me what the salary levels these people are. The study levels of the engineers in the petroleum industry is below what call center operators make. So I said, okay, here's what's going to happen. You'll get to $1.2 billion, and then you'll start consuming the entire petroleum industry. You're going to choke off this industry. You get to $1.5 billion. I do some charts of them, and your industry is going to die. You're going to, between $1 billion and $1.5 billion, your turnover rates are going to shoot through the roof. Your salaries will start rising. The same thing happened in India. It's going to implode. So, and then I came and wrote about it for Business Week. So suddenly I got